Hello DIYers, if your Nissan Rogue is anything like this 2013 SV all-wheel drive here, the first sign that you might need to replace your control arms is the tire treads. Here on the driver's side front wheel, you'll see that the inner treads are wearing a lot faster than the outside. For the first generation Nissan Rogue, this likely means that it's time to replace your control arms and front CV axles in your vehicle. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that already cover this repair, but very few of them are in one comprehensive video. So please keep watching if you'd like to see a full guide showing you how to replace your CV axles and front control arms at the same time. This guide has a complete list of all the parts to buy, the tools that were used, and all the torque specifications, along with easy access to all that information in the description below if that's all you need. Based on this car's reputation, I wouldn't be surprised if you were watching this video because you already paid too much to replace these parts a couple years ago and are now seeing if you need to do it again. This video should help you check the issue yourself and hopefully inspire you to do the work. And if not, at least arm yourself with knowledge so that you can pick the right mechanic. The best way to check is to remove the wheel. When we do that, we see that this Nissan Rogue has a rear control arm bushing that has seen better days. We can also see that the axle boot isn't doing much better. Over on the passenger side, it's essentially the same story. The bushing here looks slightly better, but the axle boot is equally as torn. These worn bushings are affecting the alignment, which is the source of the tire tread wearing unevenly. Luckily, the steps to replace the axle and the control arm share some common steps, so it does save time to replace both parts together. We also want to do both sides to avoid alignment issues and uneven ride quality. It's kind of like the shoes on your feet. If you're just replacing one shoe and not both, you'd immediately feel a difference when walking. The same is true for cars, so for suspension components, we want to replace things in pairs. If you made it this far in the video, I think it's safe for me to assume you're attempting to do the work yourself. While my video will serve as a useful guide for helping you do the work, I do recommend getting official service information to repair your car. This is how I research and confirm all my repair steps and torque specifications before I film my guides. For this video, I partnered with eManual Online, and I'm using their Nissan Rogue repair guide, which they provided to me for free to help support the creation of this video. To use eManual Online to find your car and purchase this guide is as simple as using any other retail site. And the best part is, once you purchase, the guide is yours forever to use in any future repair. For the Nissan Rogue we're working on, the service information guide found on eManual Online is exactly the same as what Nissan technicians would reference. You can see everything is indexed and all you have to do is find the right section to find the information you need. I'll be using the front suspension and front axle sections, and as you can see, everything is clickable and convenient. If you're interested in learning more, links are in the description below, as well as a promo code to help you save on your first purchase. Thank you again, eManual Online, for supporting this video. And let's get started. I'm using a lift today because it helps make filming easier, but lifting the car and using jack stands would effectively be the same thing. It might actually be even better to only lift one side at a time, based on how suspension works. But I can't say for sure since I didn't do it myself. I'll quickly show you the lift points as I start putting the lifting blocks in place. For mid-rise scissor lifts, these lifting blocks are what the vehicle rests on as it gets lifted up. I think these kinds of lift are great for home use. I have a standard 8-foot ceiling in my garage, and as you can see with the lift, the clearance is pretty good. I also work solo, so I like the stability of having a full deck underneath the vehicle, instead of just lifting arms supported on posts at the sides. Even if I mess up the lifting points, the worst case is that the undercarriage of the car will sit on the deck instead of falling off completely. Now that the vehicle is raised, let's remove the driver's side tire. We'll need a 21mm socket, and I'm using this gear wrench nylon sleeve set and a flex impact to speed things up. Links below. With the tire off, here's the bolts we'll be taking off at the ball joints and bushings. All this grease, by the way, is from the busted axle boot, flinging axle grease for who knows how many hundreds of miles. You don't have to clean it off like I'm doing here. I only did it to make sure the bolts are visible for the video. Now we can start removing fasteners. I removed the ball joint retaining bolt first, thinking that it would give me some wiggle room. But it didn't. The bolt here is an 18mm. So let's get an 18mm socket on one side and an 18mm wrench on the other to hold it down. The wrench will keep the nut in place while the impact zips the bolt off. The Mevotech control arm kit I'm using came with a new bolt and nut, but if your kit doesn't, make sure you keep these. Next up is the front side bushing. These bolts are 21mm. As you'll see, a deep socket isn't the best choice here. There's also a plastic wheel flap right off camera that can be removed to give more clearance, but I chose to leave it on. After breaking it loose with an impact, a ratchet will work decently well. For the rear bushing, the nut and bolt are 18mm. My nuts were swollen or rusted and I had to use a 19mm. Try to use an 18 if you can to avoid stripping your nuts. Definitely take care of your nuts. Okay, I'm done now that this bolt is removed. To help get the control arm out, I lowered the wheel hub onto a wooden post. If your car were on jack stands, you could use your jack to do the same thing. Alternatively, you can remove the sway bar end link, and that will let the wheel hub move around more freely. Once the control arm is freed, we'll need to remove the ball joint from the knuckle. The knuckle is grabbing on the ball joint pretty tightly, and here I'm lucky to just be able to take a mallet and hammer it out. You may need to use a chisel to open up the knuckle, which 90% of the time is all you'll need to do. Otherwise, there's a knuckle spreader specialty tool, which I have linked in the description. Next up, let's prepare to remove the CV axle. First, we'll remove the wheel speed sensor. The bolt here is a 10mm and I'm using a ratcheting wrench, but any socket or wrench will work just fine. After the sensor comes out, we'll move the wire out of the way just to make sure that we have clearance and don't damage the wire in any way. For the same clearance reasons, we'll also want to remove the brake line, which is held in place by this clip. Giving it a couple taps with a flathead screwdriver or chisel will have it pop right off. With all that done, we can remove the axle. The axle is held in place by a 32mm nut in the wheel hub and has a castle nut and cotter pin on top of it as extra safety. Let's remove the cotter pin. It's generally not reusable, so just cut them off with a pair of diag cutters and pull it out. The castle nut should come off by hand. The axle nut is torqued to 136 foot-pounds, so it might not be easy to remove it without an impact. As an aside, cordless impacts have come a long way, and even budget versions are powerful enough for something like this these days. If you're planning on working on your own cars, it's worth spending as little as $80 USD to get a tool that will definitely make your life easier. With the axle nut removed, the axle should slide right out. At least that was the case in rustless California. If you're in an area prone to rust, you might need to tap the axle with a hammer to loosen it. The wheel hub should have enough clearance, now that the control arm is removed, for the axle to fall out. Now we can work on the transmission side of the axle. Here you'll need the biggest pry bar you can find. Gently prying the axle away from the case will pop it loose. Then it should easily slide out. Make sure you have an oil pan underneath to catch the little bit of transmission fluid that will be spilling out. Lastly, we'll remove the shaft seal. While the seal may be reusable, my personal opinion has always been that if you spent the time getting everything removed, you might as well replace things like seals while you can for peace of mind. It's pretty easy to pop the seal out using a pry bar. So far, so good. Here's the old control arm and axle next to the new Mevotech control arm and track motive axle. It's always a good idea to check that the new parts match the old ones before you start putting things on. And now that everything's off, we'll just work backwards to put everything back on. So the first is the shaft seal. You can see it has a spring that helps seal itself against the shaft. We'll want to put some multi-purpose grease in there to help ensure that it doesn't fall out. Red and tacky is great, and it's true to its name, and very tacky. Now that the seal is prepared, we have to seat it back onto the transmission casing. This part is a little tricky as the seal is flexible on the inside and only has a rigid outer ring. That means that we have to find something that only puts pressure on the outside that we can hammer. You'll have to experiment a little bit, as I'm not sure even what I did is the best solution. I ended up borrowing some bearings and seal driver kits from O'Reilly's. This particular socket seemed to work okay. Some recommendations online suggest that PVC pipe of various diameters would work out well. And if you happen to work on heavy-duty vehicles, really large sockets might work out well too. As with any sealing surface, let's make sure it's perfectly clean. Then we'll line the seal up and use our tool of choice to tap it in. The goal is to seat the seal as evenly as possible, and as you can see from my poor camera angles and unreliable autofocus, there's only so much clearance. So go slow and take your time. Here's a shot of the final results. Our main goal is that the outside of the seal is flush to the casing. This looks pretty good, and now we can move on to prepping the axle. Okay, so there's a trick to inserting CV axles, and it's all in the prep. The spline shaft has a retaining clip at the end of it. You'll notice that the shaft has a line marked on it. The open part of the retaining clip should line up with that mark. The way to keep the retaining clip from spinning out of place is to use a little bit of grease to hold it down. If you do this part correctly, the axle will slide into place with very little effort. If you do it this way, it avoids having to hammer the axle to get it to lock into place. So now let's put the axle in. We just have to guide the splines into alignment, and once you do, you can give it a gentle push to lock it in. Seriously, it's that easy once you properly prep the retaining clip. With the CV axle in place, the only thing left to do is to feed the other end of the shaft through the wheel hub. Not having a control arm in the way makes this really easy, and the shaft should slide into place with no issues. Now that we put the axle nut back on, you can leave it 95% tightened and move on to the control arm. But just to keep things organized in the video guide, I'll finish tightening the axle nut and torquing it to 136 foot-pounds. After that, we can put the castle nut back on top of it, and we'll use the included cotter pin to hold it in place. Both the castle nut and cotter pin should have come with your axle kit, but sometimes they only give you a cotter pin, so you may have to reuse your castle nut. As you'll see, the cotter pin is bent on both sides to keep it in place. Sometimes people like to cut the longer side to make sure it doesn't stick out. After that, let's make sure to put all the cables back like I'm doing here. The brake line has a clip holding it in place. We'll also put the wheel speed sensor wire back in place by securing it to the grommets. And most importantly, before we put the sensor in, let's blow it out with some air to make sure that it's fully clean. While the bolt can just be finger tight, the torque spec is 7 foot-pounds if you really wanted to know. To install the control arm, we'll want to leave the ball joint for last. So the easiest way is to put the fasteners back in the same order we took them out. Let's start with the 2 bushing towards the front and get those bolts back in. For now, we just need to put the bolts in by hand. Now we can do the back bushing as well. We don't want to tighten these fully yet, as we want the control arm to rest in a natural position, which means having the weight of the vehicle on it. This will help ensure that when we're tightening things, that the bushings aren't twisted in the wrong way. Then we can put the ball joint in. More than likely, the ball joint knuckle is still too tight. You'll want to get a chisel and hammer to open it up a little bit. Here you can see that I'm just using a crowbar and hammering on it with a mallet. The more you can hammer it open, the easier the ball joint will go in. Now, just line up the ball joint and at some point it will fall in. If you didn't open the knuckle enough, you may need to hammer it on a bit. For the ball joint on this side, the camera battery died when it went in, so I'm sorry that I don't have it on camera. But don't worry, I have the passenger side filmed properly, which is coming up. Once the ball joint is in, we can begin torquing everything to spec. Since I'm on a lift, I'm using the wooden post that I used earlier. Again, if you're using jack stands, you can use the jack to compress the springs and emulate curb weight, which is what I'm attempting to do with the wooden post. Once you have some weight on the suspension, the torque for the ball joint knuckle is 46 foot-pounds. The back bushing is 104 foot-pounds, and the front 2 bushing is 126 foot-pounds for both bolts. No worries if you didn't catch all that, as the torque specifications are also in the description below. Almost done. With the control arm fully torqued to spec, let's add some additional grease to the ball joint. The ball joint boot already has some grease in it, but since the Mevotech control arm actually comes with a grease fitting, we're going to use it. When adding grease, you don't want the boot to overexpand. My rule of thumb is it's perfect right when you see the boot starting to expand. I'm using a fancy grease gun because I have it, but grease guns are actually fairly cheap, and I'll have a link in the description below. And we're done on the driver's side. Again, for the sake of organizing steps in this video, we'll put the wheel back on, but you can leave it off at home. The lug nuts for the wheel are torqued to 81 foot-pounds. For the passenger side, the process is mostly the same, except the CV axle is slightly different. I also had a bit of trouble getting the control arm off and on, but I'll show you what I did to make it work, and hopefully you can avoid those problems when you go to do the work yourself. Let's start by removing the passenger side tire, just like we did on the driver's side. Again, we'll need a 21mm socket, and I'm using the same gear wrench nylon sleeve set with my Flex Impact. With the wheel off, we can see the same set of fasteners as the driver's side that need to be removed, the front and rear bushing bolts, along with the ball joint retaining bolt and of course the CV axle. Unlike the driver's side, this axle is a little bit different because it has an intermediate shaft that connects to the transmission. We'll start by removing the rear bushing bolt, which is an 18mm, though just like on the driver's side, corrosion may have caused it to swell slightly, so check if a 19mm fits better. After that, the front bushing bolts are 21mm. Like before, a deep socket isn't the best choice here, and if you need more clearance, go with a shorter socket if you have one. Then we'll just shift it loose and move on to the ball joint retaining bolt. Again, this is an 18mm bolt and nut, so we'll use an 18mm socket on one side and an 18mm wrench to hold it steady while the impact does its thing. With all the bolts removed, we can now free the control arm. On this side, I didn't need to use a jack to get clearance. I was able to pull it loose, so you might be able to do the same, or you might try using a pry bar to get it loose as well. Once the control arm is loosened from the subframe, a mallet makes quick work to get the ball joint side to release. Next, we'll remove the CV axle. Just like on the driver's side, the brake line is held in place by a clip that can be tapped off with a flathead screwdriver. Then the wheel speed sensor line and brake line need to be moved out of the way first. The speed sensor bolt, again, is a 10mm. I'm not sure why I didn't film removing the sensor, but like I did on the driver's side, you can remove that and inspect it if you want. The passenger side axle nut is 32mm and secured with a castle nut and cotter pin. Let's remove the cotter pin, and again, it's not reusable, so just cut it off with diag cutters. Then we'll remove the castle nut by hand and use an impact with the 32mm socket to take off the axle nut. You can use the nut like I'm doing here to hammer the axle out, since you have a new nut anyways with your axle kit. The axle should slide out easily from the wheel hub after that. Here's a shot of that so that you can see. Now here's where the passenger side differs from the driver's side. Instead of going directly into the transmission, this CV axle connects to an intermediate shaft. This means that we can't just pry it out like we did on the other side. Instead, we'll first remove the retaining plate that keeps the axle shaft bearing on the support bracket. Those are two 13mm bolts. Once the plate is removed, we'll use a pry bar to loosen the axle shaft. For me, the axle popped loose without too much trouble. Just like before, we'll also replace the shaft seal. We'll skip all my trial and error, and believe me, there was a lot of it. I had the best luck using a long pry bar to pop the old seal out. Make sure you give the surface a good wipe to prepare it for the new seal. And while we're at it, let's clean off the support bracket too. I used some old 400 grit sandpaper just to make sure that the support bracket didn't have any rust or rough spots. We don't want to apply any lubrication or grease here, by the way. Okay, now we're ready for the new parts, and here they are next to the old ones. Again, it's great to check the new parts and make sure they match the old ones. I'm really excited to get these Tech control arms in. They're a good brand, and their goal is to build better than OEM, which I appreciate. Now let's move on to installing, and first up is the new shaft seal. The seal is definitely different than the one on the driver's side, so double check part numbers and make sure it matches the old one before beginning. We'll do what we did before and put a little bit of grease on the retaining spring. This will help make sure it doesn't fall off when we're installing it. I didn't find a great way to install this seal. None of the sockets and seal driver tools I had could fit in the tight space, so I couldn't just repeat what I did on the driver's side. I basically just slowly nudged it in place by using a pry bar to walk it back and forth. If anyone with experience with the seal is watching this video, please do leave a comment below and tell me what you did. Honestly, I feel like what I did involved a little bit of luck, and I'd love to get some feedback. And now it's time to install the new axle. The passenger's axle doesn't have a retaining clip on the spline like the driver's side does, since it's locked into place by the support bracket. So we'll install the axle through the support bracket and make sure that the intermediate shaft locks fully into place. To make that happen, we'll need to hammer the axle to help seat the shaft to the support bracket. Here, I'm using a rubber dead blow hammer, but you can also use the old axle nut to avoid damage. You'll want to make sure that you compress the axle before hammering to avoid any damage to the internal components. Once everything is seated, the bracket plate goes onto the mount with the two 13mm bolts tightened to spec, which is only 15 foot-pounds. With the axle in place, we'll now guide the outer end through the wheel hub. Once that's seated, we'll install the axle nut, leaving it just shy of fully tightened for now. We can now move on to installing the new control arm. This side was trickier than the driver's side for me. I just couldn't get things to line up. So what I did is, once I sort of had the bolts in place for the two bushings, I ended up removing the sway bar end link to get a little bit more clearance. From there, I jacked up the wheel hub to get everything lined up, and even then, I had to use the spiked end of a rolling head pry bar to help line up the bolt holes. I'm sure there's an easier way to get this done, so please leave a comment if you have experience. For me, it was a lot of trial and error to get the suspension at the right height to fasten all the bolts. And it was even crazier for me since the driver's side didn't have any of these issues. And since the suspension is loaded now, I went ahead and tightened everything. So again, the rear bushing is 104 foot-pounds and the front bushing is 126 foot-pounds for the two bolts. We'll put the sway bar end link back on as well, and the torque spec for that is 62 foot-pounds. Just like on the driver's side, I used the pry bar as a chisel to open up the knuckle as much as I could, which made it easier to slide the ball joint in. If you run into trouble, a pry bar and mallet can help line everything up. As you see here, I used the mallet to get the ball joint seated. I also had to use a jack to push the ball joint firmly into place so that the retaining bolt could slide through easily. Then all that was left to do was to fasten the bolt. The torque here is 46 foot-pounds in case you skipped over the driver's side and came here directly. Now with that done, we can install the grease fitting. For some reason, this side's grease fitting wasn't installed like it was on the driver's side control arm, which actually ended up being a good thing. Installing it was pretty easy, you just have to make sure you don't over torque it. And lastly, in this bad out of focus shot, we'll grease the fitting. Again, we just want to see the boots slightly expand and we'll be good to go. And this video is definitely starting to feel long, so let's go through the last few steps quickly. We still have to torque the axle nut, and that's 136 foot-pounds. Then we can put the castle nut on top, and lastly, the cotter pin is used to secure it in place. After that, we'll secure the brake line and wheel speed sensor lines if you removed those earlier. Then we can put the wheel back on. Lug nuts are torqued to 81 foot-pounds, which we'll double check at the end of the video. And let's take a moment to celebrate that the control arms and CV axles on both sides of the car are now done. We can now lower the car back to a level position, which will let us complete the final step, which is to check and top off the transmission fluid. The dipstick in the transmission fluid is located here. You'll need to use a pick or a screwdriver to push in the locking tab. Once it comes loose, you can check the transmission fluid the same way you check your oil levels. Here, you can see the fluid is barely on the dipstick. Unlike a dipstick though, the transmission dipstick doesn't represent 1 quart of fluid. I think it's only like half a quart, so please double check or leave a comment below if you know. Just to be safe, I only added a quarter quart at a time, which you do by putting a funnel on the transmission dipstick tube. After that, you can start up the car and you have to run it through all the gears. You'll want to make sure that the car is warmed up and that the transmission fluid gets to operating temperature. So while it's doing that, you can just run it through the gears a couple times. From there, we can check the dipstick again, and if we need to, we can top up with up to another quarter of a quart. And we're just going to repeat that process until the fluid is at the max line on the dipstick. And that's it. I can't believe you made it to the end of this video and are now watching me torque lug nuts to 81 foot-pounds. I hope this guide helped you feel more confident to tackle this job yourself. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe, and please do check out the description for links to the tools and the parts I used, along with all the specifications. And if you want your own repair manual, please do check out eManual online, also in the description below. Also, comments are really helpful to tell YouTube that my videos are worth watching, so please consider saying hello. I'm Alan, and this is Metaloop. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.